If there was any doubt that Leanne Tweeden, the LA radio host and comedian, was upset about what Al Franken did to her 11 years ago, it vanished when she spoke to CNN's Jake Tapper.
You know, you always... I don't want to be cliche, but, you know, you talk about trying to leave the world a better place for your kids, you know? Sorry.
We'll get to that in moments, but the bigger media spotlight remains on Roy Moore, who is continuing to deny allegations from 9 women and is still blaming the press.
As you know, the Washington Post has brought some scurrilous, false charges, not charges, allegations, which I have emphatically denied time and time again. They're not only untrue, but they have no evidence to support them.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Emily Jashinsky, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. Michael Tomasky, columnist for the Daily Beast and editor of Democracy, a journal of ideas. And Francesca Chambers, White House correspondent for DailyMail.com. Emily, with more accusers coming forward against Roy Moore, talking not just to the Washington Post, but to the newspaper group in Alabama that includes the Birmingham News, have most of the media reached a point of saying, well, they can't all be lying?
Right, and I think that's sort of what's happening here. And what's interesting is with Roy Moore's defense, and Senator Tom Cotton had a great response. The media has reported specific credible allegations against Roy Moore that he has yet to combat with specific credible defenses. And so I think that's where the situation gets tough. And I think, frankly, that's where, as a conservative, I find his blaming of the media sort of exploitive of this very understandable skepticism that a lot of people in Alabama and a lot of conservatives had towards the media, because he's not really defending himself well enough that we should just take his word at face value.
Is there a critical mass to the coverage, Michael, when various people tell various reporters that Moore hung out at the local mall and went after young girls? A woman named Gina Richardson said Moore called her out of her high school trig class to ask her on a date. A woman named Tina Johnson says he grabbed her buttocks in the law office when he was a married attorney. Does all of that reach a critical mass?
Well, it does, but you know, I think what's not necessarily completely unique, but what does stand out about these allegations is how airtight they really seem. Like that first Washington Post story, the one point that everybody I talked to about it made was, boy, it really seems airtight.
Well, you say airtight, but it is almost 4 decades ago.
Yes, right, it is 4 decades ago. But you know, we've all read dozens of these kinds of stories, and we all have a pretty decent meter for judging how solid this seems. That one just seemed really solid, and then the Birmingham News and others have come up with other stories that seem to corroborate.
What about Beverly Young Nelson, we saw moments ago, who said that Roy Moore tried to lock her in the car when she was 16, left bruises on her neck. The fact that she told her story on television, the only one to do so so far, there's another woman who's going to speak on the Today Show tomorrow, does that really have far more impact than even these carefully reported print interviews?
Well, no, going back to what you're saying, I think that the Washington Post story sent shockwaves through this race and these allegations, and talking about blaming the media here. I think the media has a responsibility, if it finds out about allegations like these, to report them, and whether that is against a conservative, against a liberal, against someone like Harvey Weinstein. If there is anyone and you're a reporter and you find out about these, I think you have a responsibility to bring them to the public eye.
Right. Well, I just think when someone goes on television, that means they're automatically telling the truth, that it just, you can see them and you can listen to their voice, you can make a judgment. Now, has the tide turned? You're a conservative with conservative commentators and outlets. You have the Wall Street Journal editorial page saying this is beyond the point of survivability and Roy Moore should quit. And Sean Hannity, after he issued that ultimatum, that 24 ultimatum, he didn't call for Moore to get out of the race. He said it's up to the people of Alabama. But certainly you're seeing more criticism from the right.
I think there are a few holdouts. Like Steve Bannon, for instance, his camp was refuting, I believe it was a Daily Beast story that said he was sort of hedging on the issue a little bit. But his camp came out and defended it and said that wasn't true. But so there's still some holdouts. But I think the conservative media has responded well to this. I think, we've seen that the tide really has turned with conservative press. And I think what's really interesting, one comment about Beverly Young Nelson speaking directly to cameras. You have all of these people who are understandably skeptical of the media. She cut them out of the equation. She spoke directly to the camera and gave people around the country a reason to believe a person rather than the press. I thought that was an interesting moment.
There's a natural instinct, I think, when it's you're a Republican and it's a Republican under fire, Democrats the same thing, to maybe be a little hesitant to pass judgment. Yeah. But it seems now that the mounting accusations have made even people who are sympathetic to Judge Moore to be at least openly skeptical, if not critical.
Oh, yeah. I agree. I think most in the conservative media that I've seen have have played this straight, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead to Al Franken. I know you want to talk about Al, but I think most liberals have treated that well too. I haven't seen much or any favoritism toward him from liberals because he's a Democrat.
All right, we will get to that. Now, you cover the White House. You were on the foreign trip. So Sarah Huckabee Sanders was very careful not to go beyond President Trump's original statement, written statement, that the allegations against Moore are true. He should get out of the race. He hasn't addressed it this. But then there was Ivanka Trump tweeting that there's a special place in hell, for people who prey on children. She has no reason to doubt the victims' accounts. But the president hasn't gone beyond that.
Well, the president hasn't spoken out about that part of the issue at all. What happened on the trip is that Sarah Huckabee Sanders delivered a statement on behalf of the president. The president then gets asked about it a day later and says, you know, she already made a statement, and we've said that he needs to do the right thing if these things are true. But that was the last time that he talked about it. There's been more accusations since then. And every time that he was asked about it this week at the White House, he ducked those questions. And so that's something that's not going to go away, I think, as you see heading into this next week, even with Thanksgiving for this White House. The fact that the president hasn't taken a side here, and he is the leader of the Republican Party.
But the president, as you know, has weighed in on Al Franken, and here's a tweet. We can put it up. You may have seen this. The Al Frankenstein picture is really bad, speaks 1,000 words. We put this tweet up. Where do his hands go in pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 while she sleeps? Well, we don't have the picture, but you saw it earlier. And so the question then becomes, Emily, a lot of media, including anchors, have kind of slammed the president for going after Al Franken, but at least not in his own voice speaking out against Roy Moore.
Right, and I think that's totally fair because these are two stories that came out in close proximity to each other, and he jumped on it. I mean, it was his response to the Al Franken allegations was really quick, and so it almost looks exploitive, but it's tough going forward. I mean, you have people on both camps, the left and the right, who want to believe their own people, so they apply more nuance when these things are about people on their own sides. I think we saw it with Al Franken. I think we saw it with Roy Moore. And it's tough, but hopefully the president will make the right decision when it comes to Moore.
Well, here's what Kate Baldwin, a CNN news anchor, had to say when the president went after Senator Franken, but not Judge Moore.
This has officially become the president doesn't get to do this moment. He doesn't get to question Al Franken and stay silent on Roy Moore, and no one should allow it.
I don't know how we're not supposed to allow it. The president gets to say whatever he wants, but is that a fair media criticism that he is speaking out, at least on Twitter, against the Democrat but not the Republican?
Well, sure it is. Sure it is. I mean, you know, that's favoritism. That's open partisan favoritism, and around charges that are really serious and should transcend that.
But what about news organizations? You've seen this more in the last 48 hours, Michael, who are now resurrecting the sexual harassment allegations made against Donald Trump as a candidate after the Access Hollywood tape came out. Yeah. Why resurrect that story, which was, you know, he's denied it. He's called these women horrible liars. There's certainly a debate about whether they should be believed. There was about a dozen of them, but we had an election after that, and he won.
Yeah, but he opened the door with that tweet. I didn't see that Trump angle being reintroduced until that tweet widely, and once he did that tweet, he opened the door. He made it fair game.
Why did he open the door?
Because it's 5 in the morning and he can't help himself.
No, I meant why do you say I'm not saying why did he do it. I'm saying why does that open the door?
It opens the door because he has now weighed in on the topic, and so he now gets to he wants to give some shots, he gets some shots.
You know, talk about Roy Moore, who, whenever he talks about this, he rips the liberal media in Alabama, and particularly goes after the Washington Post, except that all the allegations are not made to Washington Post reporters. There was a robocall, we don't know who was behind it, in Alabama in which somebody pretended to impersonated a Washington Post reporter. Let's listen.
Hi, this is Lenny Bernstein. I'm a reporter for the Washington Post. Calling to find out if anyone at this address is a female between the ages of 54 to 57 years old willing to make damaging remarks about candidate Roy Moore for a reward of between $5,000 to $7,000.
Bernie Bernstein, I don't think that name is any coincidence, and offering money for dirt, except that's against the rules of the Washington Post and just about every other major news organization. What does that tell us?
Well, I think as Emily said, you know, you pointed out that's a little potentially a little exploitive of the position that this is somehow the media's fault that this is now happening to him, or that that the media is looking to take down Roy Moore somehow here, which wasn't the case. They happened to stumble across these allegations, and we've seen it from the Washington Post, and we've seen it from other local papers as well.
Right.
I think it's trying to confirm what the Moore camp wants voters to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even if you believe that the Washington Post would love to knock Roy Moore out of this race, that doesn't mean the story isn't true. And there were a lot of interviews with also people who the accusers had told about this.